see you guys in the dark.
So back in 2007, I found myself working as a bartender at a now-closed pub in my hometown. Not a job that I particularly liked, but it did pay the bills. At this time, they had hired a new kitchen manager that we all simply knew as Kearney. Kearney was a pleasant enough man, mostly keeping to himself, but always stayed late to help the barman do our closing duties, so we all kind of liked him. In town, Kearney had yet to find a place of permanent residence, and I had recently lost my tenants, so someone suggested that he ask me. He was considerably older than the tenants I usually took in, but having a streak of bad luck with them my own age. I thought an older man with a nice steady job may be a shift in the right direction, so I agreed. Kearney wasted no time and followed me home that very same night, only he wasn't alone. Lawrence, the boyfriend of Kearney. Honestly, I hadn't even realized he was gay up to that point, but was water off my back nonetheless. Looking back now, what really should have bothered me, though, was Lawrence's appearance. He looked like he had been sleeping on the street. So Kearney moved in. Lawrence was there a lot, too, and it was easy to know when due to his mobile ringtone, sounding like the quacking of a duckling. Kearney had some habits that were rather noteworthy to the story. In particularly, he basically never closed his bedroom door, no matter what he was doing in there. It was always open. And although he was a very heavy smoker, he never once smoked inside the house. So Kearney had been living there for about 2 weeks when I had come down with an awful case of pink eye. This being highly contagious, I was given a lease of absence from the bartending job, and therefore decided to go wait it out at my sister's for a few days. Apparently I didn't mind giving it to her. Sorry, sis. So the day my sister was scheduled to come in to pick me up, I took a casual stroll into the bar that myself and Ben, my good friend from high school, and at that time my coworker, had been building in my house, and something caught my eye. All our liquor bottles were completely empty. Now those who had been frequenting my house at this time would know that we weren't just talking about 1 or 2 bottles of brandy, but bottles of whiskey, gin, vodka, schnapps, liqueurs. Basically, it was a fully stocked bar that could host a pretty big party without requiring much in the way of additions. So I called Kearney in, asking him what he knew about all this, receiving feedback that Lawrence and he had been on a slight drinking binge that had left me both furious about the thousands worth of stock they had drunk out, but also slightly impressed that he was actually still alive. Regardless, I said that I will be dealing with this upon my return. So I'm with my sister for a few days, and on Friday, I get a call from my local police department, asking me if I know a Conrad Schultz. Ironically enough, I didn't. They finally add that I will probably know him as Kearney, and that I should probably come down to the station, as they had just arrested his boyfriend, trying to sell my camera equipment. So my sister rushes me back to home, where all my camera equipment was on display at the police station. It's on this visit that I'm informed that Lawrence was actually a Navy SEAL who got dishonorably discharged before turning to a life of crime, and now had a rap sheet the length of the Bible. The kicker was that both he and Kearney were actually homeless men who had met at the Salvation Army. So Lawrence is in jail, and my sister drops me off at home, more or less the same time that Kearney gets home as well. Based on Kearney's account of what had happened, he had turned Lawrence in himself, as he couldn't allow Lawrence to do to me what he was trying to do. Although I had appreciated his sacrifice, I still told Kearney that he would have to go, having been the overall cause of all of this, however, not wanting to leave the man homeless. I gave him until the end of the month to make sure that all of his arrangements were met. So Monday comes, and having just completed staff meeting, I walked home to encounter a very much free Lawrence sitting on the sidewalk across my house, watching it. I confront Lawrence as to why he's there, and he tries to apologize before begging for money. Rather out of character, really. I dismissed him without giving him a cent. Now I go back to the previous night. See, I had mentioned the staff meeting for a reason, as it was at that meeting that we ended up getting a sizable list of liquor bottles that we had gone missing from the storeroom, leaving us all suspecting each other. I, however, would not have to wait long to figure out who the real culprit was, as a few days later I opened the garage bin in my kitchen to see the missing bottles, all empty and staring back at me. I decided to sit on this information for the time being, although I did photograph it, just in case I needed evidence later. I had also called over Ben to inform him of the developments. As this was quickly becoming a detective game, we decided to enter Kearney's room to search for further evidence. Nothing of significance in there, with one exception: 2 single photographs of Lawrence before he had turned into the homeless version of Lex Luthor or Charles Xavier. Actually, there were several of Lawrence's things still there, but as Lawrence had spent a lot of time there before the incident, I accepted this as normal. Now I should also add that I had mentioned Lawrence's release to Kearney, and had told him that if I even suspected they were still seeing each other, I would throw him out of the house myself. Only a few days would pass before this came into play. On this particular night, I had been bartending again, and Kearney had constantly been stopping by the bar to help himself of draught glasses half full of wine and full of Coke, which he would go drink outside the restaurant. We confronted him about this, but as he currently pointed out, he was still a manager, and we had no right to tell him what he could or could not do. On his 4th trip, however, I had grown suspicious and decided to follow him outside, where I encountered Lawrence sitting outside, sharing the half Coke, half wine concoction with Kearney. This pissed me off, so the next day I returned to the restaurant with my photographic evidence that I had handed over to the general manager, who was also kind of a friend of mine. Although I hadn't physically seen it, I had heard the confrontation through the office door when he fired Kearney. Kearney left, obviously upset, and apparently had no idea that I had been the one who had turned him in. So we had closed early that night, and I was walking home. Going past the high school, I saw Kearney coming from the opposite direction. He walked right past me, literally only saying 2 words: "I'm scared," before disappearing into the darkness. That would be the last time that I would ever physically lay my eyes on Conrad Schultz. So we reached the final week before Kearney's eviction was to take place. Ben had come to stay with me for that duration, as we both wanted to monitor the situation and make sure that nothing else had happened. It was in this week that Kearney's behavior suddenly changed. He was constantly smoking in his room, and his door was closed 24/7. In fact, neither Ben nor I caught so much as a peek from him in that entire last week, which we hadn't thought much of at that time. So the day of Kearney's eviction comes around. Ben had gone home for a few hours, and I finally hear Kearney's bedroom door open. Someone walks out of the room, opens the front door, and leaves. I follow him outside, but somehow he had already completely disappeared. What was left, though, was his house keys, indicating that he obviously wasn't planning to come back. I took a look at the keys, noticing something pretty strange. Although the correct keys were all on the keychain, there were also several that weren't mine. Why would he leave me the wrong keys? I remember myself thinking as I walked into his room. His room was a shock, not because of the state that it was in. The 2 had broken his bed in an act of wild monkey sex, but I had known about that already. As I said, he never closed his damn door. But more that he had literally left almost all of his belongings behind, one with exception. You guessed it, the 2 photos of Lawrence. Upon further investigation, I suddenly realized that all traces of Lawrence ever there had completely vanished, with all of Kearney's stuff left behind. There was one thing of Lawrence's behind, though: his duckling ringtone, which it turned out hadn't been so much a ringtone as an actual duckling, which now strolled around casually in the vacant bedroom. We named him Neville. So Ben returns and gets updated about the developments, both of us thinking the way he left was rather weird. Of course, the whole thing had been weird. It was only when I asked the infamous question that all this became a conspiracy theory. Did you ever actually see Kearney in this last week? It was to our shock that we realized that neither of us had. Suddenly putting puzzle pieces together. The changing habits, Neville the duck, the wrong keys, only Lawrence's stuff being gone. It was too great discomfort that we both asked the question: who had really been living in our house that last week? During the next few days, Ben and I went on a mission, searching the town, crawling to drain pipes, trying to find any traces of Kearney's whereabouts. But they all added up to nothing. Conrad Schultz had simply vanished off the face of the earth. That wasn't the case with Lawrence, though. No, he was still around, having made some new homeless friends. We encountered him several times begging on the streets. I asked him every time, "Where's Kearney?" But he just acted like he had never heard of him. The last time I would see Lawrence was across from work, attempting to break into a car. I had called the police on him, and they had arrived rather quickly, arresting him right on the spot. While he was being led away by the police, I shouted after him one last time, "Where is Kearney, Lawrence?" But he just ignored me and let the cops drag him away. The next day, I filed a police report, reporting Kearney as a missing person, and suggested that Lawrence may know something about it, but nothing ever came of it. So, Lawrence, I don't know if you did something to Kearney or not, but if you did, I really hope that you get caught for it. This happened when I was still in high school, so I was about 16. My friends at the time, Jack and Dan, and I would often skip the last class or two in favor of hanging out at one of their places, or cruising around in the old school muscle car that Jack had fixed up with his dad. One day, we swung by a grocery store that had a place in the back that made pretty good Chinese food, and that sounded like it would hit the spot right now. We parked, browsed the aisles a little, and picked up some sodas as our orders were being prepared. The three of us paid, and on the way out, I told them I had to take a leak, giving my bags to Jack to look after. The bathrooms are usually at least fair on the cleanliness side, but I guess that day someone was asleep at the wheel, or no one had bothered to notify the staff of the mess inside. I was, and still somewhat am, shy while peeing, so I like to use the stalls when able. The handicap stall's toilet was filled to the brim with murky brown water and toilet paper, more wet paper clinging to almost every surface within 2 feet of the toilet. Yeah, no. The stall next to it was even worse. Someone had finger painted in there. Seriously, who does that? The final stall I checked had urine all over the seat, and some on the floor, as well as some brown smudges and damp toilet paper on the seat. But I figured I didn't have to touch any of that. I just used some clean paper to lift the seat, wiped my hands thoroughly, and did my business before flushing and leaving the seat up, not wanting to give anyone that might come in the idea that I had left the seat down and pissed all over it. Unfortunately, that's exactly what happened. Enter the homeless man. He had long, dark, matted hair and matching beard. His face was almost completely hidden. He wore the typical hobo garb, dirt-covered coat, slightly torn jeans, worn sneakers that might have been white at some point, and frayed fingerless gloves. I gave him a small smile and polite nod as he shuffled past, giving me no more than a quick glance. I was washing my hands by the time he reached the stall he had seen me come out of. I heard him huff and grumble a little bit before he backed out of the stall and growled "Nice" at me. I tensed and looked over to him. He was nodding in a thanks a lot kind of way, gesturing into the stall as his eyes glared at me between his thick, coarse beard and his bushy eyebrows. Being the extremely awkward and non-confrontational teen that I was, all I could muster was a somewhat spastic, "That wasn't me." Totally convincing, right? "This wasn't you?" he grumbled. His voice suggested he was somewhere between confused and furious as he pointed to the toilet seat. I shook my head, staring wide-eyed at him before quickly rinsing my hands and stepping over to the paper towels. I could see him out of the corner of my eye, still looking at either me or the stall, and grumbling under his breath. I was almost done drying my hands when I heard him stomping up behind me. I whipped around and saw him reaching out his left hand. I initially thought he was reaching to grab some paper towels, but his hand clapped down on my shoulder, his right hand swinging up until his fist was pressing painfully into my chest. He had one of those foldable knives with the serrated edge hovering over my neck. "You little bastard," he spat through his teeth, his face red with anger. "You think you can treat me like shit? Just because I live in my car? Just because I'm dirty, huh?" He roared, getting louder with each sentence. Honestly, I think I could have pissed myself back then that I had not taken care of that already. All I could do was stare at him with the classic deer in the headlight look, standing on my tippy toes and trying to press my back into the tile wall behind me to avoid contact with his knife. I wanted to explain that the seat was already dirty when I came in, and that I wouldn't want to clean up some inconsiderate asshole's mess either. Again, words escaped me, and all that came out was me squeaking, "Please, please don't hurt me." I started to blubber, unable to stop the tears from welling up and running down my face. I guess this shameful display moved him to take pity on me, taking his hand off of my shoulder, but he pressed his fist harder into my chest, causing me to let out a choked cry as I closed my eyes and leaned my head back, waiting to feel the blade slide across my throat. I felt him lean in, his foul breath on my face as he whispered, "Next time, I'll make you lick it up." The pressure was removed from my chest so suddenly I almost fell on my face, but I caught myself, spun around, and ran without looking back. My friends were talking and leaning against the car when I came tearing out of the store. They chuckled at first, asking if I had fallen in, but quickly realized that I was in distress. I told them everything that had happened. Jack, almost being the protective big brother to me, stormed inside and notified the store's employees. The police were called and ended up catching the homeless man as he sat in his car, parked in the grocery store parking lot. They had cuffed him in the back of their cruiser as they questioned me a few times. I kept glancing over nervously. He never took his eyes off of me, staring daggers at me until they took him to the station. He apparently had a few priors of aggressive behavior, but had never pulled a weapon before today. I did feel kind of sorry for him. I have a soft spot for the less fortunate. And despite him coming within inches of cutting my throat, I felt bad that he had become such an angry person due to his situation. It was now getting him into deeper and deeper trouble. I don't know what happened to him after that. My friends and I avoided that store and the area around it for the rest of the time that I lived in that state. Jack offered to let me drive on the way to his place, saying as how I asked him almost every day to get behind the wheel. But I told him that I didn't think it was a good idea right now. My hands were still shaking a little. Right? We sat in silence during the drive, and while we ate, turning on the TV for some background noise. Things did pick up as time passed, and it was decent after all that. I felt a little better as weeks went by, but ever since, I have had the habit of wiping down the seats of any public toilets I use, even if it's not my mess. I can just wash my hands afterwards. To the homeless man that accused me of looking down on him, pinned me to the wall of a grocery store bathroom, and held a knife to my throat, I hope I didn't make life too much harder for you, and that you are doing well. But just in case you still hold a grudge and possess that knife, I think it's best for both of us that we don't meet ever again.
When I was a kid, I was about 9, and my mom took me and my brother, about 6, to a thrift store. She loved going to thrift stores for some reason. Maybe it was the cheap prices, or the opportunity to find something rare. Of course, shopping at thrift stores kind of involved us going to the bad side of town. Well, on this day, my mom had begun browsing through the store for something she might find of interest when she realized that she had forgotten her wallet in the car. She hands us her keys and instructs us to go to the car and get her wallet for her, so me and my brother do just that. We go out to the car and grab her wallet and turn around to start walking back. Just as we turn around to head back to the store, we notice this dirty, homeless guy, in retrospect, an obvious addict, walking towards our direction while mumbling something. We could tell from the look of his eyes that we had his attention. My brother then tells me to just walk fast back to our mother. Being the older one, I felt the need to seem brave. I told my brother that we're fine, but agreed that I'd be best to begin walking back. Luckily, the guy was coming from the side of the thrift store, so we had a clear shot of the front door. We begin walking to the door when we hear the guy call out to us. We ignore it and keep walking. Just as we're halfway to the door, the guy calls out again, but louder and clearly directed at us as we referred to us as boys walking ahead of him. As if it wasn't bad enough that we were the only ones outside, this guy begins pointing it out and asks us where our parents are. For no reason other than being naive, I stopped, turned around, and answered that our mom was inside. He laughed and as if we were bluffing, attempted to call me on it. At the time, I didn't understand why he would even think I would be lying. My brother quickly told me to not stop walking and not answer him at any point. I felt the same panic he did, and finally understood that getting to our mom was now our first priority. The guy then began saying that we seemed like we were by ourselves and instructed us to go with him. Obviously, at this point, I ignored him and just began walking faster towards the door. I could then hear him begin walking towards us at a fast pace. We opened the door to the thrift store and bolted through the door looking for my mom. I remember that as we opened the door, he flat out told us that going inside wasn't going to stop him, and that he would follow us inside. I felt sheer panic when I heard him say that and raced to find my mom. My brother and I remained close, but kind of spread out for the more coverage. I was having trouble finding my mom when I looked at the door and saw the guy begin to open it. My heart began to race, and a sense of hopelessness was sinking in when all of a sudden I hear my brother call out that he had found my mom. I raced to my mom and began explaining everything. She, of course, brushed it off, saying that nothing was going to happen. I look over and hear this guy talking to the front desk cashier, claiming that his 2 boys had just ran in and that he was looking for them. The lady told him that she did not see any kids run in. He then turns around and spots us. He takes a step forward us when he realizes we're grabbed on him by our mom. Now I would think that at this point this guy would just give up, but no. He calls out to my mom to ask to see if we were hers. My mom looks at him and again asks if we were her kids. The mom tells him yes and begins looking at him and then back to us, semi-surprised at the situation. The guy then says, "Sorry, I have nephews that look just like them, and I thought they were them. I just wanted to come and say hi." I quickly yell out that he was lying and had asked us if we were alone. The guy, unfazed by what I said, then turns around and begins walking out the door like nothing had happened. My brother and I began telling my mom that it was the guy that had followed us and was trying to kidnap us. My mom then brushed it off, saying the guy left already anyways, and that it was probably a misunderstanding. I felt angry that the guy had gotten away with harassing us, and that if it wasn't my mom actually being there, he would have gotten away with kidnapping 2 kids without a problem.
I'm a student, and I live with 3 other people in a house in a quiet town about 20-minute walk and a bus ride away from the university. By quiet, I mean that there are no clubs or anything, and our neighbors are mostly retired folks and young families. Our house is the exception to the rule. There is not an enormous homeless problem around here, but it is massive in the next town over. This happened in February, so not that long ago. So one Wednesday night, one of my housemates decided that she wanted to go to a club night that they have every week at the university. Initially, she said that she was planning to stay at one of her friends' houses, but apparently this friend hooked up with someone pretty early on, so she was going to come home after all. Being the good introvert friend that I was, I told her that I'd wait for her to get back before I went to bed, since I was the only one in the house that evening, and I wanted to make sure that her drunk ass got into bed safely. She told me that she wouldn't be too late, and that she'd definitely be back by midnight, which was good since that's when they turn off the street lamps in our street. This makes everything pitch black and terrifying. I accidentally discovered this one day, though fortunately I had a torch on me at the time. This will be important in a moment. I was sitting in the kitchen, waiting, while my housemate messaged me her progress. Finally, she messaged me that she was on our street, and I got up to unbolt and unlock the door. By this time, it's actually 5 minutes past midnight, since apparently drunk girls don't walk remarkably fast. So the street lamps are all off, but she's already on our street. And the hallway light was on, so I wasn't worried about her finding her way. When I opened the door, my housemate is making her way merrily up the driveway, so I patiently hold the door. Just as she reaches the bottom of the stairs, I notice some guy turning onto our driveway, completely perpendicular to the path. There was no logical reason to do this other than to come to our house. My heart stopped, and I basically dragged my housemate into the house and slammed the door shut. I turned all the locks, including the deadbolt, and stood about 6 feet back between my friend and the door, as if it was about to swing open. After that, I closed all of the curtains on the ground floor and checked the other windows and doors to make sure that they were secure. Now, after the guy didn't knock or try to break down the door or anything dramatic, but all I could think of was, how long had he been following her, and what would he have done if the door hadn't been shut when he reached it? Annoyingly, my drunk housemate was annoyed at me for pulling her in, and apparently stretching her jumper. Now, she was pretty tipsy at this point, so her judgment wasn't 100%. But when I tried to sit her down and explain what I'd seen, she first insisted that I hadn't seen anything, and when I persisted, she said that it was probably just a homeless guy who wanted to ask for money. She then went to bed as if nothing was wrong, though she allowed me to keep the hallway lights on all night after a bit of persuasion. Anyways, since I knew that the house was a fortress, and that my housemate definitely wasn't planning to back up my story to the police, I let it go without reporting it. Honestly, she's halfway convinced me that I had imagined it, and or was overreacting at this point. However, I still keep the door deadbolted whenever I'm alone in the house, even if it's in the middle of the day. This happened last year around Christmas time, as I was on my way to visit my parents. I'm traveling from Nashville to Kent Island, and it's me and my dog Kona. I'm a tall, fairly built man. It's about a 12-hour drive, and it sucked. When we got to Upper VA, around Harrisonburg, I was tired, and Kona needed to go potty. I also needed gas, so I pulled into a gas station around 10 p.m. I pulled up to a pump and started getting gas. While the gas was going, I left Kona in the car and went inside to get some food and much-needed Red Bull. When I walked out of the gas station, I noticed a slender, raggedy man standing by my gas pump. As I reach my car, this man tells me that he is a homeless man and in need of extra clothing given that it is very cold outside. I am empathetic. However, all I have in my truck are presents for my family and my clothing for myself. I apologize and tell him that I can't help him, but I wish him luck. He says he noticed I have boxes in my truck and that anything will help. I tell him I have no clothes for him, but offered him the food that I just bought in the gas station, but he refused. He grows agitated and asks if he can have the heavy coat that I am wearing. I tell him no, that I need it. He starts yelling and telling me that I am spoiled and live off my parents. I am frightened, and Kona jumps into the driver's seat to observe. He reaches out to grab my shoulder, and I back up and bump into my truck. He approaches to about 1 foot away from me and says, "I need your help," loudly, with one hand on my shoulder and another in his pocket. At this point, Kona gets apeshit in the truck and barking at this man and snarling her teeth. I can hear her bark, so can he. He looks at Kona, and I tell him, "Leave me alone right now, or else I'll open this door and my dog will rip your fucking throat out." This seemed to do the trick. He backed away, and I quickly opened the door and hopped in, forcing my dog out of the driver's seat. She's still going nuts, and I waited until he's far enough away to put away the gas pump. I start to drive away, and on the side of the gas station, I see the same man jump into the passenger side of a black SUV. I was going to get my dog a big steak, but like 5 minutes later, she shit in the truck, so I think that she was scared. Anyway, homeless man at the gas station, let's not meet again. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night, and I'll see you next time.